Hello everyone, my name is Daniel Rader. This video is for economics teachers who are working on Unit 2, Day 2, looking specifically at shortages, surpluses, and market equilibrium. I want to start with the resource for the independent part of the lesson and then work my way back to the intro model of the lesson. So I want to point out just a couple of comments of things that you may want to share with your students as ways to support and extend their line of thinking as it relates to this lesson. So in the context part of this article here on the price of peanut butter and a supply shock shortage, this could serve as an opportunity to draw interdisciplinary connections to materials the students are learning about in their other classes, particularly as it relates to regional weather patterns associated with climate change events, and looking about what happened 10 years ago to the supply of peanut butter when it was affected by a climate weather related event. In this section, when the writer begins discussing what happens in terms of wholesale price increases, it may help to have a reference point to help frame students thinking about the price increases. So one way to think about this is to compare the price increase for peanut butter to that of regular goods in the consumer price index, and looking specifically at the average rate of inflation, which, excluding some recent trends in 2021 for the last 10 years or so, has been averaging below 2%. So when the price of Jif is going up 30% and Peter Pan is going up as much as 24%, it can give students a way to really think about how to compare the changes and to really see just how much of an increase this really is compared to other types of durable goods that they may purchase. I highlighted this section here because again, it'll help students to think through supply and demand. So since the tight peanut supply means peanut butter costs will eventually make their way to consumers who are facing higher prices on just about everything they buy in the supermarkets, which really helps to get at this understanding, thinking about market equilibrium, where neither the producer nor the consumer is particularly happy, nor are they particularly upset. They both agree to make the transaction. There's a little profit that takes place, but we don't see the emergence of a surplus or a shortage that can affect the supply chain. In this case, what we're seeing is that as the supply of peanut butter shifts to the left, the demand curve won't really change a whole lot, which you'll see in a minute, but it does change the new equilibrium price, and it does result in higher prices for the peanut butter. And then in terms of the graph itself, it's pretty self-explanatory, but this may be an interesting point to talk to your students about the difference between inelastic and elastic demand. I know whenever I've taught the lesson in terms of helping students think about certain products that people are going to buy, more or less regardless of how much the price goes up, is to use an example of a rubber band and to literally stretch out the rubber band as a way to show how something can be elastic versus a product that may be inelastic that, again, they don't necessarily have that flexibility in terms of price controls. So visually speaking, this is what your students will be getting out of this article, that as we have a hot, dry summer and competition from cotton, the supply of peanuts goes down. And as a result, we have a new equilibrium price and the price is higher. So instead of being $1,200 per ton, we originally had $450 per ton. So we see a pretty marked increase in the price per ton of peanut butter. Now, going back to the lesson itself in the Google Slides, just a few things I'd like to share with you before I end this video. So thinking about the overall topic of the lesson is really designed to help students think about shortages, surpluses, and market equilibrium. And in the first note to teacher, I made a tutorial video for students that you may want to refer them to, or you may want to look at yourself if you're not as familiar with Google Sheets. So what I ended up doing in the video for students, I showed students how to essentially plot the data that's included in the Google Slides, put it into a Google spreadsheet, and to use the chart creator to create first a scatter plot, and then to show them what it would look like as a line graph. So in terms of the material in the lesson itself, we have additional supports for different student populations. The slide speaks to students with disabilities. The opening slide is what students see as their opening slide in their video. Lesson objective to just kind of really emphasize the point of the lesson itself. and then just some guidance for instruction that's provided by the Digital Passport for Social Studies team. So this is the foundation for not just this particular lesson, but it actually goes into day 3 and day 4, where students will be engaging in a case study looking specifically at Roy and their opening of his original famous pizzeria, and thinking about what are the kinds of steps that businesses can take to reinvigorate their businesses and to entice consumer demand, to allow them to raise the prices on particular goods. But in day 2, students will look at the data for pizza slices at various prices, the quantity of units demanded in thousands, the quantity of units supplied in the thousands, and then thinking about what's happening at each of the points. Is there a shortage or is there a surplus of the product? And we can see where the demand and the supply are the same. This is the equilibrium point. It's at $2.75. It's something that you could show your students if you don't want to use Google Sheets, and I pointed this out in the video I made for them. They can use this plot point as well. They can literally just copy paste, so press Control C and then Control V will make a new point, and we could just match it up. So if yellow was demand, I can go with 350. We see that there are 80 units being demanded, and I can do the same thing. Again, I could Control C, Control V, and we can see at 325, it's now 100. And we can see how essentially the demand curve will slope downward, supply curve is the opposite, and we can see where the market equilibrium is. And then in terms of things for students to consider that we use in these hypothetical examples, we're assuming that there's stable, competitive, and fair markets, that we're not operating under monopolies or other things of that nature. So things that you may want to discuss with your students is to consider the significance of what's happening when there's a shortage, what's happening when there's a surplus, and what can we say about the overall health of the marketplace when there is an equilibrium. And then the independent part of the lesson is what I started this video off looking at the peanut butter shortage, supply and demand curve, and looking at first pairing the reading with the chart itself to explain the chart, to really show what is happening as the supply shifts from S0 to S1 in the article, and really helping students to consider the various factors that are responsible for that shift and what's really happening. And then as a wrap up, it may be nice to have a discussion with your students to have them consider what might it mean if the supply curve started moving in the opposite direction. How would we describe what that graph then depicted? And then the check for understanding could be done if you're in person. You could easily do it in person. If you are working remotely in the spring 2021 semester, this could also be done asynchronously. Students basically, it's an exit ticket to check for understanding. It's a very easy way to see how well students understand the concept of shortages and surpluses. I thank you for your attention, and I look forward to the next video in the series. Have a great day, everybody.